The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of invisible government of society by manipulation of the motives which actuate man in the group. Trotter and Laban, who approached the subject in a scientific manner, and Graham Wallas, Walter Lippmann, and others who continued with searching studies of the group mind, established that the group has mental characteristics distinct from those of the individual and is motivated by impulses and emotions which cannot be explained on the basis of what we know of individual psychology. So the question naturally arose: if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it then not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing about it? Edward Bernays, 1928.
This new act of aggression, aimed directly at our own forces, again brings home to all of us in the United States the importance of the struggle for peace and security in Southeast Asia. Aggression by terror against the peaceful villagers of South Vietnam has now been joined by open aggression on the high seas against the United States of America.
They engaged my services, and I wondered what I could do to change the impression made by the words, "Coolidge was weaned on a pickle."
That was a problem. What did you do?
And so I decided that at that time, actors and actresses did not quite belong to a family home or a family party. And I decided that if President Coolidge had breakfast with Al Jolson and the Dolly sisters, who were ecstasiastic dancers, and Charlotte Greenwood and other actors and actresses, the public would recognize that he was an extraordinary humanist kind of personality, and that obviously he couldn't have been weaned on a pickle. He must have been weaned on pure milk. And so what I did was to tell Colonel Woods to hire a couple of sleeping cars, Pullman cars, take them down to Washington overnight and have breakfast with Coolidge. And as these actors and actresses came in, I'd say, "What is your name?" And they'd say, "Al Jolson." "Mr. Jolson, President Coolidge." And we had no contact with the newspapers. They were the principal media. There was no radio and no television. And next morning, there wasn't a newspaper in this country, and there were about 2,000 dailies then, and 10,000 weeklies, that didn't have a front page story that says President Coolidge breakfasts at the White House with Al Jolson, the Dolly sisters, and other Broadway stars. And the New York Times, in its second headline, had the line which said, "President nearly laughs." And what the effect of it was, obviously, at that time, Gallup was not yet around, but Mr. Coolidge was elected President of the United States, and I have a letter from him hanging on my wall.
Edward Bernays was born in 1891 to Jewish parents in the town of Vienna, Austria. The very next year, his family would move to New York City, where he would be raised. Edward was Sigmund Freud's nephew 2 times over, being that his father, Eli Bernays, and Freud each married each other's sister. After graduating from Cornell University, Bernays decided to begin a career in journalism rather than pursuing one in agriculture as per his degree. Early on in his career, Bernays fought for sex education and created the Medical Review of Review's Sociological Fund Committee, where he gained the support of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Anne Vanderbilt, and John D. Rockefeller. It was during these early years of Bernays' life where he learned much about advertising and the human psyche. An avid studier of his uncle Freud's works, he began to suss out a systematic breakdown of the inner workings of society and how to implement them on a grand scale. Although you do not know his name, Edward Bernays is arguably to this day the most influential human being in our modern society. For example, does your town fluoridate your water? Well, you could thank Edward Bernays for that. You see, in the mid to late 1940s, Edward Bernays was hired by Alcoa, the aluminum company of America, to orchestrate a public relations campaign with the goal of convincing political leaders and the public to add their aluminum waste byproduct, fluoride salts, to the nation's water supply. He accomplished this by using an old advertising trope that he himself invented roughly 20 years prior, using doctors, scientists, or some form of, quote, professional to endorse a product so the public will blindly follow. In this particular case, it was dentists. Bernays took a study on fluoride in teeth and got dentists across the country to sign off on its ability to prevent cavities. Using the endorsement of dentists countrywide, he was able to sell this concept to different states and municipalities. To this day, fluoride is added to nearly all of the drinking water across the United States. All thanks to Edward Bernays. Now, what his campaign neglected to mention was the fact that you ingest water far more frequently than you brush your teeth with it, and that all the chemicals in said water are absorbed through your skin on a nightly basis. But none of that mattered, because dentists say it's good for your teeth, so fluoride is a go. This was a method invented by Bernays when he was commissioned in the 1920s by the Beechnut Company to sell bacon. You see, before the 1920s, breakfast was barely a thing. People might have eaten a scone or something light, but for the most part, before this time, breakfast was essentially non-existent. So what Bernays did was to send letters to 5,000 doctors asking them if a bigger breakfast was healthier than a smaller one, being that we expend energy every night while we sleep. 4,500 of these 5,000 doctors agreed, and the phrase, 9 out of 10 doctors approve, was born. Bernays then paired the bacon with eggs, presented it as part of a healthy breakfast, doctor approve of course, and thus was the beginning of bacon and eggs for breakfast, still going strong 100 years later. Now think about that. That's 3 major things that are regular parts of society to this day. Fluoride in the water, bacon and eggs for breakfast, or any breakfast for that matter, and 9 out of 10 doctors approved. All Bernays. Bernays wrote this in his 1928 book Propaganda,